Tracking tip number 3. The number one reason we fail at tracking. Henry Ford once said, "If the people really set their minds on anything, it is impossible to prevent them from getting what they want." Henry Ford also said, "Whether you believe you can or can't, you're right." That's a pretty profound statement, and I think it's very true. What I've learned in sports and in life in general, and getting into tracking, the number one reason is it's mental errors, mental mistakes. That's what's gonna get you in the end. This actually is a book in itself. I could write a book about this subject. I actually study a lot of this stuff, like psychology, sports psychology, those kind of things. Why people fail, why people succeed. Why are some people really lucky? I know people that they get into drawings all the time, lotteries and stuff, and they win. I know people that hunt and are very successful, and other people who seemingly put a lot of time in and a lot of effort just can't seem to get over the hump. I think it has a lot to do with mental, and this is a huge, vast subject. And I'm going to try to condense it down, and if there's more, if people want me to go more depth, I will down the road on other tracking tips. I can go into more detail. But when I speak of mental, what I'm talking about is, first of all, attitude. When I got into tracking, I wanted to learn from people who had success in that field. Many of you are probably very familiar with the Benoits. I've got like 3 of their books or 4 of their books. I've got a bunch of DVDs that they put out, and I read them over and over and watched the videos over and over, and I tried to just pull as much information out of those videos as I could as I was in the process of learning in my infancy and beginning. And since I am kind of into that psychology thing, one thing stood out at me that probably a lot of people miss when they read the books or watch the videotapes or whatever, is they're insistent over and over again on the mental aspect of it. They will go into detail and say, you have to stop thinking about what's going on at home. You have to not worry about your bills. You have to not worry about your job. You don't have to. You can't worry about your car starting at the end of the night. You can't worry about getting lost. You have to stop thinking about all those other things. You have to clear your mind of those things, and that in itself is somewhat of an impossibility. But I will address that by saying this: you're going to get thoughts. There's things going to come up into your mind, and you're not going to be able to stop that. But what you can do is you can choose not to entertain those thoughts. Let's say you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden you think, "Oh, I have a bill I have to pay at home. That's right, I forgot about that bill. I got to get that bill paid." Okay, that's fine. But what you can do is you could tell yourself, "I do have to pay that bill. But right now I'm hunting, and so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about that bill until I get out of the woods tonight, and then I'll address that situation later on." And that may help you to not keep dwelling on that situation. If you put it on the back burner and decide that you're going to address the situation another time, it will help you to not keep dwelling on that. I will guarantee you, if you're dwelling on other things besides hunting, when you're in the woods, you're not going to be focused enough, and you're going to miss your opportunities. And I'll guarantee you that. I just can't stress that over enough. I think it's Bruce Townsley. If I pronounce that wrong, I've butchered his name, I apologize. But he wrote some of the books with the Benoits. I think it was him that was following Lanny, and he made the comment that when Lanny enters the woods, he enters into a Zen-like state. And that says a lot, because basically what he's saying there is Lanny blocks out everything on the outside world, and he basically blends in with the woods. The focus you need is you might track all day for a 1 second opportunity at a deer, and if you're not prepared or if you're not focused, you're going to miss out on that. But now, me saying that, I'm going to say something that I also am not going to be able to really explain really well with words, but I'll do the best I can to explain, to try to get my point across. You have to be focused and you have to be concentrated on your activity, but you can't be so wound up tight. The best way maybe I can explain it would be, let's say you're not hunting deer now, but let's say you're in a war, and let's say you're walking through the woods and you could run across the enemy at any second, and the enemy is known to be hiding in the bushes all over the place. Now, you are going to be so tensed up and nervous and so super vigilant, hyper vigilant, that mentally you're going to wipe yourself out. And you're going to be able to maintain that level of focus and concentration for a while, but eventually it's going to wipe you out. So it's not that's not the type of focus that I'm talking about. The type of focus I'm talking about is just being with the woods, noticing things, smelling things. Even if you stop, it wouldn't be a bad idea to actually stop when you first get in the woods and just take 5 minutes and just take a couple deep breaths and normalize with the woods. We live hectic lifestyles and we have constant stimulus in our lives. And when we walk into that woods, it's a different world. It's a different mindset. Things move slow. Things have their own pace, their own way, and it takes a while for you to kind of normalize to that. When I used to stand hunt a lot in the Northwoods, it would take me about 3 days, dark to dark, before I finally got into the rhythm of the woods. And I really felt when I got into my stand, I could just be in that stand and just relax and spend the day. And I wasn't so concerned about what time of the day it was, or how many hours I had already sat, or any of that nature. It was just like if I was a deer that was in that woods too, or a squirrel or whatever, and it didn't matter if I sat there for 4 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours. That's where I belonged, and it's just where I was going to be. And that's kind of that feeling that you have, at least I have, when I'm really in that zone in the tracking. It's like I'm just part of the woods, and I'm just enjoying everything with that woods. I see things, I hear things, I smell things, I notice things. I'm just like super aware, but not tense or really hyper vigilant. And after you get in, it's almost like a state of hypnosis, and that's the mentality that you want. That's the mentality that you're actually striving for. If you can fall into that, like as they talked about Lanny saying, this, entering a Zen-like state, that's kind of where you want to be. Because then you're kind of just taking everything in, but you're not burning yourself out mentally. Getting back to the Benoits again, I can't say enough about the family because they don't know me at all. I've never met them, but they have taught me an awful lot in reading their materials, and they're monstrously successful. So I think that whatever they have to say is worth listening to again and again and again. And I give them all the credit in the world. One of the things that stands out with me with that family is, and I hope they don't take this the wrong way, none of them looks like an athlete. Not a single one. Every one of them looks like the average guy that I would see if I walked into my local bar, a middle-aged man that's got a factory job. None of them look athletic. And none of them were young when they put this material out. And so right off the bat, that taught me that it's not physical. It's got to be something else. Because if it was physical, they wouldn't be successful, but the guy that runs marathons would be. But yet these guys got walls full of trophies. So it points to that mental aspect. Getting back to, again, I'm going to point a lot at Benoits because they gave me a lot of this material. So I want to give them credit for it. They taught me a lot. I learned a lot from them. They stress over and over and over again. you have to believe. I believe I'm going to kill that deer. Every time I take a track, I believe I'm going to kill that deer. You have to believe you're going to kill that deer. Mentally, you have to prepare yourself. Now I'm going to kill that deer. I'm going to get on this track, and I'm going to kill this deer today. And I don't care. I don't care how long I have to go. I don't care if I get hungry, cold, wet, tired. I don't care. I'm gonna get this deer today. And you have to be convinced of that. You have to, in your own mind, you have to really believe what you're telling yourself. That yes, I am going to catch this deer. I'm going to go get that deer. It's that positive mental attitude. Mental attitude, your mental approach, is of utmost importance. If you take a track saying, well, let's see what happens. Let's see how it goes. I'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll take it for a couple miles. I'll see how it goes. I know you'll quit. You'll quit on that track. Back in the beginning, when I used to do a lot of stand hunting in the North Woods, I did a lot of sitting from dark to dark. Now I've heard a lot of people say that they sat from dark to dark, but when the truth really comes out, you find out that people don't sit dark to dark very often. It's a very difficult thing to do. Again, I don't think it's a physical challenge as much as it is a mental challenge. And what I did, how I prepared myself for all-day sits in the North Woods was, I simply made up my mind before I went in the woods that day. And I learned this from just being aware of who I am and how I react to situations. What I noticed was, if I went to the stand in the morning with the attitude, well, I'm going to go sit this morning out, maybe till noon or whatever the case, whatever time I would kind of choose in my mind, and I would say, and I'll just see what happens. We'll see what happens. I can guarantee you I never sat all day, ever, when I took that attitude into the woods, ever. But the days that I said, I'm going to sit until dark unless I get my deer, those are the days I was always capable of sitting to dark. And it was all due to the fact that I had made up my mind ahead of time that I was going to do it. And I think that carries over into tracking as well. I think if you tell yourself before you get on that track, I am going to shoot this deer, I am going to get this deer, I think that your chance of success on that deer are so much higher, so much greater. You'll hit some where it comes across where a doe's feeding, and you'll say, I don't know, I can't sort this out, this is too much of a mess, and you'll give up. But you can sort it out, and you'll get better by sorting it out, and you'll get better by trying to sort it out. Even though you're confused, you'll get better at it, and you'll get better the more times you practice. But if you quit, you won't get any better at it. And that's not a physical thing or an ability type thing, that's a mental attitude. It all comes down to mental attitude. Why don't you take the mental approach, I'm going to sort this track out. He came into this group of does and fawns here, and I don't know where he is, but I'm going to find his track. I'm going to find it. And you'll circle around and you'll look and look and look and search and search and search, and you might go 200 yards out from that spot, and finally you'll pick up one big track coming out of there and say, okay, I got him. Now I'm going to go again. And it may have taken you a half hour, an hour to sort that out. But that's a mental thing. You can give up. It's easy to give up. It's always easy to give up. It's easy to quit. There's another aspect to the mental part of hunting or anything in life. And it's kind of a gray area, and it's kind of that spooky realm, and people probably are going to cry wolf or BS or whatever, and everybody has their feelings on it and so forth. But I want to touch on it a little bit because I've studied it quite a bit, and I happen to be a believer, and I'm all right if other people aren't a believer. I believe that our attitude actually makes things happen. I really do believe that. I firmly believe that. Look at people who are lucky. Ask a person who's lucky. We all know people who are real lucky. Ask them. They'll tell you they're lucky. I don't know. I just always win. I don't know. I always win. I usually shoot a deer when I go in the woods. Why? I don't know. I can't prove it, but I can tell you this. I've never met anybody who's lucky or has a lot of success that believes that they're not successful or that they don't have a lot of luck. I'm a firm believer. This is odd. I very seldom get a cold, actual cold, like a regular cold, flu, or whatever the case may be. Now, I've dealt with a lot of physical ailments, especially in the last 5-6 years or whatever. But as far as like getting a cold, the last time I had a cold was, if I remember right, was 20 years ago on a trip to Colorado to go elk hunting. And here's the bizarre part of that. Somewhere along the mix, while I was getting ready for that trip and planning for that trip, a thought entered my mind. I sure hope I don't get sick for this trip, because this trip is really important to me. And I don't know why I had that thought. I don't know where that thought came from. All I can tell you is that I started thinking about it a little bit. I started thinking about it. Man, that would really suck if I got sick on this trip, and it would. That's the one thing I really wouldn't want to happen. And though I won't say I dwelled on it every minute of every day or anything, but it crossed my mind, and it was on my mind. And I'll be darned if I left the state and went through Minnesota, got into Nebraska. When I got into Nebraska, I got sick. And I'm talking violently sick, throwing up. I was sick for probably 4 days. It was probably as sick as I've ever been from like a cold flu type situation, before it finally cleared up and I felt good enough again to actually function. Now, I can't tell you why. I don't know what happened. But all I can tell you is that up until that point, I never thought about getting sick, because I just never do. I never do. And still to this day, people will say, "Well, don't come over. I've got a cold." I don't care. I'm not going to get it. Whatever. I get mild symptoms and stuff, but I really attribute it to the fact that I believe I'm not going to get sick, because I believe I'm not going to get sick. I believe you're going to get deer if you believe truly down deep in your heart that you're going to be successful, that you're going to get deer. Something happens when you ever notice that it's hard to get your first trophy deer, but then after you get 1 or 2 or 3, it becomes easier and easier. But one thing, think about your mental attitude, how it changed through that process. Most people who don't have a trophy deer or don't have a lot of success are afraid of failure. They fear failing. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to. They'll feel bad about themselves if they fail. But whereas when you become a successful person, that attitude changes. And what happens is people start to say, "I just believe I'm going to shoot a deer. I'm going to get one. I'm going to go shoot a buck tonight. I'm going to go get a deer tonight. How are you going to do this year? I'm going to shoot a big buck. I'm pretty confident I'm going to shoot a big buck." It was interesting. I had a friend point that out to me one time. I was sitting in his cabin up north. We were having a few drinks and enjoying good conversation, and deer hunting came up, and he mentioned something to me about getting a deer, and I said something about shooting a deer or something, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I do remember this very vividly. He looked at me and he says, "Do you realize that hardly anybody ever shoots a big buck up in the Northwoods? And for some reason you believe you're going to shoot one every year?" He says most people would be happy if they shot one in their whole lifetime of hunting up here. And he says, "You believe you're going to shoot one every year." And I really never really thought about that a lot. But then after I started thinking about it, it was like, oh yeah, I do. I really do believe I'm going to be successful. I really believe I'm going to shoot deer. Does that really equate to me shooting deer? I don't know. And to what extent? I don't know. But I do know I see it as a pattern over and over and over again. Um, Successful people believe they're going to succeed, and non-successful people fear failure. And that, I believe, is huge. I believe that's huge. Um, Again, I'm not going to try to convince you of anything that how it all works. I don't know. If I had those answers, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you in front of this camera right now. I'd be a billionaire on a beach somewhere in the Caribbean or something. But it's just something that I study this stuff and I look at this stuff, and it's one thing that's really kind of jumped out of the page at me, and I think it's worth noting here. So whatever it takes for you to develop that attitude, I think you need to. I think you need to work on that. I think you need to work on that attitude. I'm going to shoot a deer. You know, a friend of mine once told me, but if I don't really believe that, I'm lying to myself. Okay, I agree. I agree with you 100%. But so then don't lie to yourself. If that doesn't work for you, don't by all means don't lie to yourself. But tell yourself instead, say, I'm going to become a successful deer hunter. I'm going to keep striving and I'm going to become a successful deer hunter. That's not lying to yourself. That's being honest that at this moment you're not. But at some point in time you're going to be. That you're striving for that goal. That is a goal that you intend to reach. Now you don't put a timetable on it. That might happen tomorrow. It might not happen for 2 or 3 years. But there's a positive affirmation that you can use to get you to that point. Tell yourself, I am going to be successful. I don't know when, but I'm going to be successful. I'm going to shoot trophy deer. I am going to have success deer hunting. I'm going to get that job. I'm going to find that girl. I'm going to own that home. All these things. I believe that there's something there to it, and I believe that if you're a woe is me attitude, I think it's going to equate to a lack of success. So take it for what it's worth. Worst case scenario, you're a lot more fun person to be around, and you have a more positive attitude. It certainly can't hurt. Again, you can exercise your muscles to get stronger, but you can also exercise your mind to be stronger as well. But I do know this: anybody that stays with it, anybody that sticks to it, is going to taste that success. You're going to be successful. And the one thing that's going to keep you in that game is going to be your mental attitude, not your physical. It's not going to be how well you can shoot your gun, how fast you can shoot your gun, how big of a four-wheel drive you have so you can get back into the swamp further or whatever. It's not going to be that you can run marathons and your physical condition is a peak that any human could possibly be. What good does it do to have all that stuff, fancy gear, all the training and everything, if you give up on a track because it got messed up with some other deer and you just said, I can't do this? All that training, all that stuff that you have, all the physical, all the gear isn't going to get you a deer. Isn't going to get you a deer. It's the mental that's going to get you that deer.